Hold on.
It's not. Yeah, I'm trying to get.
Looks like we are live. So while we are live, it looks like Brad is getting some things set up on his end. So I'll give a few seconds there. I'm going to go in and check my feeds here, make sure everything's good on our end as well, on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn. Everything seems to be rocking and rolling on our end here. Do on this live. So I've been working with Brad and Elizabeth quite a bit over the last couple of months. I'm part of as like a coach, part of their Built Right program, and they can do a much better job at explaining exactly what they do and all of that. But part of this came from both Brad and Elizabeth used to be in the marketing agency world, so know everything that we go through in terms of the agency world. And after they got out of the agency's space, built this program to help contractors, more so roofers, to be able to help grow and scale their businesses before actually working with the marketing agency. And so some of the things I've learned through their program is some of the things to do before working with us. I've worked with a few clients where it's like, man, I wish there was a program for them. And those relationships ended afterwards, or after I got connected with Brad and Elizabeth. So Brad, Elizabeth, why don't you guys kind of give a much better kind of explanation as to exactly what you guys do and all of that?
Sure. Yeah. So I'll give my little quick one-liner, and I'm sure Elizabeth will have things to add on. But essentially, we want to help contractors become self-sufficient and build some of their own internal processes around client acquisition. And we want them to know how to go get their jobs, and we want them to also create the proper leverage that they need so that when they do invest in marketing, it's able to go further. The cost to acquire a customer is getting higher and higher and higher online, and that does not mean that you should not invest in online marketing at all. It just means that there's some things that you probably want to have checked off first. So that's one of the big things that we work with our clients on.
And kind of similar, obviously, kind of to tack on to that. So when Brad and I both owned our agencies, I was in a different vertical. And what we both saw in our separate verticals is that the cost to acquire a customer is typically pretty high. But if we can diffuse that cost, then we know that, it's just a bigger bang for our clients' bucks. And it's also something that they can do on their own and kind of take ownership of, that they don't necessarily have to consistently outsource. So looking at it, how do we get that, cost per acquisition as low as possible so that the margins are better and the profit is higher?
Yeah. So prior to me being in the agency world, I had a fintech business. It was a mobile app that was like there to compete with like Cash App and Venmo, allowed roommates to share payments and everything. And one of the things we depended on heavily was like the referral aspect of things, of like, how can you get one customer in the door, and then how can you turn that one customer into multiple customers? Because then it reduces your cost of acquisition. So Brad and Elizabeth, you guys do a lot of like there's like 4 phases of your program. And that's what people kind of go through whenever they begin working with you guys. What are those 4 phases? And what's kind of involved in each step? Because it's usually not until about step 3, and when it's like, you should probably begin working with an agency at that point. But 2, 3-ish around there. And so why don't you guys kind of walk through exactly what that is, what goes into a few of those things. I know like referrals are huge, knocking on doors are huge, doing signs in yards, all those things.
Sure. The 4 phases, I'll start with that. And then sometimes I talk over Elizabeth, but she has better things to say than me. So I want to be careful about that. The 4 phases, the first one is you really just need your foundation and scalable processes down. So that's really a lot of like the initial sprint that we have with our clients, is helping them have a really strong foundation. Because if you outsource your growth to someone else, then it's going to be a struggle. We want them to have a foundation of growth and some momentum before they end up investing in some more risky things. The second thing we do is we have them hire a few people so that it's not all on them. We don't want them to be the bottleneck. We want to create processes that allow them to easily delegate. And that will be when we also add in one acquisition channel. So usually it really could be any, and we call it a linear acquisition channel. So it's going to be a Facebook ad or Google ad. It could even be pay per lead. And when we say linear, it's because generally you're going to hit a point where you have a pretty good idea of money in versus not necessarily total sales out, but like if you use average numbers, you can begin to grow just by doing math, essentially. And this is where we want to get really clear on what's our cost per acquisition and find like a stable cost per acquisition. Once we've begun scaling that, starting with a starter budget and then incrementally growing until, when I say scaled, it's more than most people are comfortable spending right now, but we want to help them know what to spend and how much to spend.
Right.
And we want them to feel confident in that. And so when I say scaled, I mean like probably more than most people have ever spent monthly on a Google ad or a Facebook ad. It could be 8,000, 10,000, up to 15,000 a month just on that one channel. And that will like create major growth. That alone, if you have the right team and the right acquisition channel, you're in great shape. Next is when we go back to branding and things of that nature. So we'll call that nonlinear marketing, just to use similar vocab. That's going to be really centered around going back to becoming the roofing guy or the window guy. You may sponsor little league teams. That at that point, you're really just trying to get your name in as many places as you can. This would be going back to really investing in referral relationships. We have a contractor that we talk with a lot in Dallas that spent the money to become the main sponsor of a realtors association in a suburb, and it pays them dividends. So that's when we want to start looking at investments like that. You could even do TV and billboards. It's when you are less reliant on a direct, immediate, quick ROI on your marketing. And then phase 4 is really the harvest phase. Like you scale leadership, get yourself out of the day-to-day. This is when you begin trying to have people come on that can begin making real business decisions on your behalf. And at that point, you probably want to maybe start bringing some marketing that you outsourced in phase 2 and 3, maybe bring some of it in-house. So those are the 4 phases. Elizabeth, do you want to add anything? Because while this stuff is a lot of like where I get obsessed with, Elizabeth is the one actually like, she's honestly having a lot more conversations with the clients than I am. So she probably can speak towards on the inside a little bit.
I think, it really is about making sure that you're doing everything in your control at every inspection and every job, so that when you are, using a paid, whatever that might be, you are just making sure that you're having multiple touch points. And I think one thing that we talk about a lot in conversations is, SEO and Google ads are good and they can be really effective. But the reality is it's a cold situation. And so the conversion rate is going to be lower. And I think the temptation when you're doing a lot of anything cold is that race to the bottom. You don't want the differentiation between you and your competition to be always being the cheapest. And so adding in these touch points that we do is really like building those relationships and building that social proof. I always say that trust is transferable. And so I trust when I'm searching for something, I trust the results of my Google search almost as, as much as I trust Google. And so
Right.
it's not, I will still make purchasing decisions based on that, but I'll make them a lot faster when my mom says, hey, this guy did my roof, you should use him, because I trust my mom and I trust her judgment. And so how do we couple those things? And again, like do all the things that we need to do on that, building the trust and, building those foundations so that when we are spending money, it just makes it a lot less risky because you've built a lot of things that, push fast forward on that know, like, and trust.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to kind of just high level walk through each phase because I think it's kind of important. Like we're talking like phase one is like the foundation and like the process that you can scale, but it's, diving deep into that. I know a lot of times you guys work on like, hey, do you guys even have like a um, CRM in place? Do you have even your own website? What platform do you build it in? And those are things that you can do yourself and try to get in place. And so a lot of times, like I have people who come to us and they're like, hey, I want to work with an agency. I want to, begin paying X amount of dollars in Google ads, or I want to do whatever. And I'm like, cool. What do you guys use as your CRM? And they're like, we don't, or we use Trello, or which that's better than nothing, or we use Google Sheets or something. But a lot of it is also like the foundation of expanding that even further beyond just adding context to your database, like doing email marketing, doing follow-ups with them, automating some of like your sales process in a way in terms of like when you have a estimate that goes out, having something that automatically follows up with them, or at least creates a task for you to go and follow up with them. So those are a lot of things you guys walk through in kind of the phase one, correct?
Yeah. So in phase one, it's the first things that we want to look at are what are the things that you need to get done that you've just been avoiding, honestly. And that's in our program, while it sort of could appear as some do-it-yourself type of program, it really isn't about that. I don't need you to build your own website. I don't need you to learn how to do SEO or run ads yourself or any of
Right.
that. Like, I don't think that that's necessarily where you need to be putting your effort. And I don't think that's a good use of most people's time. I think it can
Right.
become such a massive distraction. What it really is creating leverage. So one, what are the easy, quick things that we can do? We can have a CRM pretty easily. If you don't, you can either hire Brad to build you a website, and there's no such thing as too early to get a good website built. And if you're going to get a good website built, spend the extra $1,000 and get a good one built on WordPress that you're not going to feel like you have a to-do. I've built websites for our business just over the course of a weekend, and it felt like, okay, well, this will do for now. And then it became some to-do floating in my head for an extended period of time. Beth knows how many times I was like, I really need to, I hope I'm going to try to spend some time on the website. And right now, I mean, there's things that we can do. The point is, like, what are those things that are just taking up energy? And then next, from a process perspective, we want to help you create leverage. If your ratio of input to output is in that like 1-to-1 range, you're really going to struggle. So if I want to get sales, I have to go spend 6 hours knocking doors, and then I will get a sale. Now, I think that you should do that if you need a sale, but I also think you should begin thinking longer term and thinking, how can I build a process to where it doesn't just require this amount of money or this amount of time to go get jobs? How can I turn one sprint of effort into my next 3 or 4 jobs? And how can I have processes that allow me to actually delegate some of this stuff? Not, oh, it worked for me and go figure it out yourself, but have the process be the reason, the vehicle of growth, rather than the random salesperson that you hired that maybe stays and maybe doesn't. They're just a driver. So that's really in phase one, is we want to get the basics done. We don't want you to be embarrassed of your website. We want you to have a CRM of some sort, and it doesn't have to be a nice one. It doesn't even have to be a permanent solution. We want you to have your branding and some clarity on your branding. And then we want you to have processes that will begin to allow you to create more leverage in how you're getting work, and also more leverage in how can you delegate things effectively.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things you mentioned was like, you can have somebody build a website. So a lot of it is like you guys are in a way are kind of, I'm going to say, and a lot of people hate the word consultant, but in a way consultant, like here's what you should be doing. Here's who you should go talk to, those types of things. So you mentioned like, hey, this is a point where you should have a website built. You can do that on WordPress. You can do it on platforms like Wix, even though I highly recommend against using platforms like Wix, Weebly, all those things.
I'm pretty heavy on just build a website the right way on
Yep.
WordPress.
Yep.
It's not that hard to get done.
Absolutely. And so if, I hear all the time, the one thing about like the marketing space, even like the roofing industry and everything is, I just went and got a emissions test today done in our car. And it's like, it was in Missouri, that's regulated. So it's $24, takes you 20 minutes, you're in and out kind of thing. In the marketing space, you could go in and get a website, somebody off Fiverr build it for you for $500, $750. And I mean, you could have a website go for 10, 15, 20 grand, depending on the complexity of the site, everything like that. So a lot of times what I hear is I get people come in and they're like, the cost for your guys' website is outrageous. Or, I've talked with other people and their websites were only this, they're only that. What is, it's obviously a concept of like perceived value and everything and what goes into it. But a high quality website, if you were to go pay for one and have a company go build it for you, should have, your main 5 pages, your home about, contact us, services, have individual service pages built on it for all of your different services you offer. So in the roofing industry, you have roof repair, commercial roofs, multifamily roof, residential roofing pages, those types of things. And then probably have some location pages as well for each area that you service within your metro. But coming from people who used to be in the marketing agency space, what is kind of like the rough ballpark of like, if you are going to pay somebody to do this, you should probably spend between X and X for a site?
Do you want to answer? Or do you want me to, Elizabeth?
Go for it.
All right. So I would say if you're just getting started, anywhere from 3,000 to like 6,000 or 7,000 is worth it. And
okay,
now you can go lower and find a great website, but you're probably putting things more at risk. In the 3,000 to 6,000 or 7,000 range, you're gonna be getting a good website. Now, I know that that's probably higher than a lot of people want to hear, but at the end of the day, a website's an example of a leveraged investment anyways. If you put a good website together, people are like, well, how do I know this is even going to be worth it? It's like, if you get one more person a month to call you that wouldn't have, over the course of the year, you will close a percentage of them and make your money back. And then the next year as well. And also, will this $6,000 or $7,000 website, if you're going to go even on the higher end, stop you from spending $2,000 today and then $10,000 in a year? Could you build a website that you're happy with? That's one of those things where it might be uncomfortable, but like everything, growing a business is uncomfortable. Like, get a helmet, like it's just one of those things where they use lack of trust as their reason for not doing what they know they need to do. But in reality, a lot of the time it's just because they don't want to confront what it really takes to be great.
Yeah. Yeah. It is uncomfortable. It's one of those things that I always say, like, if you don't wake up every day in a way feeling uncomfortable, like you're doing something wrong, there should always be like the slightest bit of being uncomfortable in your business. What I want to kind of talk about and kind of transition to like that phase 2 with you guys is kind of like the validating and growing like that one channel of acquisition. So lot of this first phase, building the foundation, CRM, website, the referral processes, anything that like they need to get done
Neighborhood
that just,
marketing, very
yeah,
big. It's a huge thing. If you can
yeah.
turn one job into multiple, that's something that we really want to focus on in phase
Okay.
one.
So I want to touch on that real quick before we hop into phase two on the neighborhood marketing. So a lot of times I hear is like, hey, we've done knocking on doors, we've done the signs in the yards, anything that's involved around that, but it doesn't work. We've not seen an ROI out of there. How are you recommending people to track that? Because it's one thing to just spend a bunch of money on, these door hangers, or to have somebody um, dedicated towards knocking on those doors. But so when you're working with people, are you recommending them like, hey, if you have somebody who's going out knocking doors for you, like they're the ones that they get paid, $100 per, deal closed, or what exactly is entailed with that? Because that's where I see a lot of people get missed is they try to work in these foundations, no matter if they're in the roofing business or not. If they own a retail place and they have these things like these coupons and all that stuff, or flyers up in different businesses, they don't have a way of tracking that. And
Yeah.
so there's a lot of those foundations people have to put in place for those too.
So I want to let Elizabeth answer more tactically that,
Yeah.
but I think to address it's not working, it's like, that's kind of a crazy thing to say in regards to just understanding basic consumer behavior. If you have ever seen 10 of your competitors' yard sign in one neighborhood, then it worked for them. And you need to be aware that it will work for you. And I think a lot of what happens is it's like if someone tries to ride a bike for the first time and they're not good at it, and then they just write off riding a bike for the rest of their lives, even though if they just put a little bit of work in, they would realize riding a bike is very pleasant. So I think that a lot of the time people just quit early. And if you don't actually have a plan, like if you just have some unorganized checklist of things that you're doing and it's just solicitation essentially, well, we're putting the yard sign out because we want them to see it, and then we have these door hangers and I'm putting them everywhere. I've knocked some doors and people are just acting uninterested, and I thought that it was supposed to be warmer because I'm the neighbors. It's like, yeah, but you probably didn't do it very well. If you put things in a specific order that's very intentional and repeatable, right? Scalable processes, repeatable processes, then things start working a lot better. And in an experiment, there's controls and variables. If you are introducing a ton of variables by doing things differently over and over again, and then the biggest variable, which is whether a customer is going to say, yes, I'm interested in you inspecting my roof, and then eventually, yes, I'm interested in you replacing my roof, that's not going to stop being a variable. So you need to create as many controls up front as you can, and that will allow you to actually analyze whether it's working or not. You have to also have a big enough test group. But tactically and tracking, I think Elizabeth may be better suited for that.
And to kind of continue that too, and even the thought of the uncomfortable. So I think it's really easy with door hangers and things like that to, like Brad said, in a very just hang the door hanger and go and check it off your list. But the reality is it really isn't about the door hanger necessarily. It's about having conversations with the neighbors and building those relationships, because we all see lots of ads and lots of things all the time. And the reality is we get a little bit blind to it sometimes. So it's really easy to hang a door hanger and walk away. It's a bit more difficult to start having a conversation with someone, but what's more effective? Obviously it is the conversation, and it's framing that in a way that, you're saying hey, we're going to be out here making a lot of noise and a big mess. And we just want to make sure that, if you need something, this is who you need to contact. Our goal is to keep it really clean and to, take good care of everyone around you. But sometimes the wind blows, and sometimes, our guys drop something. And so it is about the touch points. And, we can break out, Brad get the hash marks out. And it really, I think a lot of times people think about it as, kind of in silos and like direct mails in a silo but it's not. It's really about touch points, and you want to be, who they all see over and over again, because that is built-in social proof. So, as far as, even tactical and kind of tracking, obviously, I would say that in marketing, in my years as an agency owner, attribution has always been one of the most difficult things, right? Even I was in the e-commerce space before, and we'd say, look at these results, and they'd say, well, those are repeat customers, or, there's always going to be a little bit of, and trying to find a way to build in, accountability with your team and the conversations that they're having, and doing things with QR codes, and being really consistent with call to actions, so that having that very like consistent message. If you use, roofle, if you're constantly sending people like, hey, you want to see how much your roof costs? So being really consistent with those. And like Brad said, a lot of it is controlling and isolating variables. I think as small business owners, we love to burn the ships. Like we love, and it's easy and it's really tempting to do, but building in that consistency and then isolating variables is the thing that, trusting the process. Those are the things that you will see results. And if you don't, then if you're consistent, you can at least identify where the hangups are and where the hiccups are.
Yeah.
Okay.
To piggyback off real quick, she said attribution is like difficult. Attribution also, I know this is going to really be contrary to how I think a lot of people consider marketing, and especially like the very data-driven people. But attribution can be an excuse sometimes as well. If the question of it's not working, it's like, okay, so you're saying you didn't get any jobs next to where you were working? No, I'm not saying that. Okay, so what didn't work? Well, I am not getting people who are calling from the direct mail. It's like, did they get the direct mail? I don't know. I didn't even ask. Okay, well, how did they reach out to you? They got my number from Susie. It's like, okay, maybe it did work, and maybe you're just thinking that the conversion event is always going to be on the marketing piece, and it just almost never will. If you can do all these things and create an integrated approach where each thing piggybacks off the other, measuring it is, have you gotten on roofs in that same neighborhood? Are you having conversations with the neighbor? At the end of the day, you're trying to get invited. You're not trying to ask to be invited. You're trying to create as many opportunities for them to invite you to inspect their roof. And you need to make them feel like that's their decision. And them following your process is really just making it about you.
Yeah.
Not to say that you don't need processes eventually, and like within the whole thing, it should be, but them calling you directly from a piece of mail or from the door hanger or any of that, and that being the only way that you'll accept something is working, that's going to really, you're going to miss a lot of opportunity. And I'm not saying people be like, no, I'll take any job. Yeah, but you need to not diagnose something is not working because the conversion event isn't happening exactly where you think. You might have someone who clicked on your Google ad, cost you a lot of money, looked at your website, and then looked at you on Instagram, and then saved your number to call next week. What worked?
Yeah.
What didn't? And that's the thing is, I think people need to look at the macro, because if you get obsessed with the micro, then you're just going to probably shoot yourself in the foot.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and it's like in that case, that person could have messaged you via Instagram. You could have been like, my post on Instagram is what converted people. And it's like,
It happens
really,
all the time.
It's a combination of everything. Like marketing is about the repetition of things. That's why you see billboards all over the place for Chick-fil-A on every single exit next to a Chick-fil-A. And then like, it's because that is just what gets people. And then you get them pushing notifications to your app and like those things on like a restaurant side of things.
And the Chick-fil-A doesn't have the phone number on the billboard or their
Right.
website or anything. That's the thing
Yep.
that people don't think about is it's like you think Chick-fil-A is looking at billboard revenue. Like they don't know.
No,
Like maybe
they don't
some
care.
weird data scientist can figure that out. But at the end of the day, they're just trying to create as many touch points
Yeah.
and impressions as they can.
Yeah. So we have all these different channels that we could go down. But you guys talk about in the phase two is like, how can we go and just validate and scale one channel? So in phase one, we're talking about all the different things. You could build a website. And like, I like to say a website is kind of like a book or a brochure. I had a book sitting here and it's like, this book isn't going to do anything unless the author is doing the work to put the book out through the different channels to actually sell the book through Amazon, through Kindle, through Barnes and Noble, whatever. Otherwise, them going through the whole process of writing the book is worthless. You building a website is worthless unless you're going through the channels to then get your website seen, whether that's organic, whether that's just sending people them like they're like with their business cards and flyers and all that stuff. So what does it look like when somebody's trying, like you're trying to figure out, okay, what is the best channel for you guys to scale for you? Because it's not a one size fits all. And I imagine for each client that changes and varies per client. So what does that process look like? And kind of like, I guess in phases, what do you recommend them doing if you had like a one size fits all approach?
So in regards to like the first thing to try, it's kind of just in some ways personal preference, but also going to be some trial and error. I have told people, hey, start buying leads on Angie's List. And I think a lot of contractors will be like, you told them that? You like, but at the end of the day, like there's that business is around for a reason, like someone's having success.
Mm-hmm.
I know a $50 million roofing company that's like one of their biggest clients. So it's like people have made this work. So it's anything, whatever you think that you can have done consistently. So a Google ad campaign, I think, is a great idea. And that's usually the big example I give in a crazy cost per acquisition turning into a low cost per acquisition if you have the right things set up in place. But Google, Facebook, I think people dog on Facebook ads for roofing, and I understand why. But at the end of the day, it's because you have to sift through a lot of trash to actually get to the good appointments, but the costs end up being fine. And
Mm-hmm.
people need to look at their cost per appointment with the management fee and the ad spend. So I like people to try something where they can maybe run a Facebook ad themselves. And it's not that I want them to be Facebook ad experts, but you don't have to pay a management fee for that. So why don't we just like see if we can make that work? Because it doesn't, I mean, I have an ad campaign going right now and it's producing us a ton of leads every day. And I believe it or not, the only thing I've done is turn down the budget. And that's the only edit I've made for 3 weeks. Like Facebook can work like that. If you get a good ad on Google, I think it's probably not necessarily the last resort, but it's when you're kind of tired of trying things because Google will work no matter Google ads are tough and they're expensive. If you have a terrible budget, then you're not going to get good results. But at the end of the day, if you put if you have someone running Google ads who knows what they're doing, you're going to get calls, and those calls can and should turn into appointments. If they're not, it's probably not the marketer. It's probably not the market. So there's only so many people left to look at.
Yep. Yeah, it's crazy to me. We try to track everything as much as possible. We have the call tracking numbers, anything along those lines, and even like on the websites we build, like the form has got a drop down of like how did you find out about us, because we have technology that can tell us like, hey, this person came from Google Ads or they came from Facebook. But user selected attribution is typically the best, because it's like there is no questioning where this person came from, because they selected I came from Facebook or I came from Google. And then you kind of have to, like, if you're doing Google, then you have to decide, okay, was this a Google ad or was this organic? Those types of things. But then a lot of times I get people, and then like you're going through and you're diving through all the data and everything. We actually lost a client this year. Marketing agencies lose clients just as everybody else does. And it's like, I was going back and looking at the data and everything, and it's like they entered 3 or 4 of their contacts of like the leads we sent them into their CRM. The rest of them weren't even entered in the CRM. It's like, so what did you do with the rest of this information? And so I agree with that point. It's like you if you're getting all these leads and they're not closing, like it could be you're getting the wrong leads, or the marketing agency isn't narrowed in on the right clientele. But it could also be a problem internally that you're not sending these leads through the proper processes to then be able to close those leads and act on them at that point too.
Yeah. And it's a combination. I think a lot of the time it's, hey, Google, these are people searching roofing contractor near me, and you can see exactly what they searched and clicked and called for. So you can say whatever you want as to why it's not working. I'm going to take it with a grain of salt, though, because at the end of the day, they made the decision to search, click, call, or fill out the form. So the variable is what happened after. How did the conversation go? And they could have changed their minds, but if that starts happening in large volumes, then you start looking like, okay, this is not how consumers really behave. So what's going on? You're like, the leads suck. It's like Glengarry Glen Ross.
Yeah. Well, and it could be even like something as simple, like I have a lawn care client that they've actually been with us the longest, and with our call tracking software, it records the calls. So we were going in when we were first implementing this, we were listening to the calls, and I realized like when they were answering the phones, like one of their employees in the office was like, yeah, it's X amount of dollars per man hour. We have to send 2 men out there, blah, blah. And I'm like, you can get their name or their email or their phone number. And so like, it was like, that was something that for us, we were able to then coach like, hey, I would recommend like, this is your sales process. We're the marketing guys, like you guys, but here's what we would recommend changing on there. And so like now even like the call tracking systems are great, because then leadership, and that kind of goes into like phase 4 when you have like a leadership team and all that stuff, is then they can coach down. And it's like not a question as to whether or not somebody was answering the phone or not, or those types of things. It's like, hey, they answer the phone, but how can we improve this conversation? Because believe it or not, a lot of home service businesses aren't answering their phones right now. It's sometimes difficult to get people to come out and give an estimate. And so that level of like customer service and everything is huge. So we go from like getting that one channel, and then, you could do Google ads, you could do Facebook ads, you could do organic search, those types of things. For a lot of people
organic search, really quick, I would say SEO is something that you should start investing in the moment you have a good amount of revenue coming in that you can kind of rely on. It doesn't need to happen in phase 2. I think SEO is probably more of a phase 1 thing, as long as you get phase 1 done right. And the reason is because SEO takes so long, and it doesn't, if you do 1 roof a month, if SEO can produce you 1 roof a month over the course of the year, then it was worth it typically, unless you're investing in one of like the crazy huge SEO companies, because you're liquidating the investment. It doesn't, your cost per acquisition just goes down over time with SEO. So it's something where I just think you should probably start sooner rather than later. The problem is when people invest in SEO because they need it to work. And in general, that's going to be a bad idea. But if you need marketing to work, then you better start with the things that you can do, not what Brad can do for you.
Right. And you said it because it takes a while. So it's not going to be you're going to engage with a marketing agency or hire somebody internally to start doing some of the SEO stuff. And next month you're going to start seeing this influx of leads. Like we always tell clients, like months 1 through 3 is when we're really trying to like get the campaign going. We're learning. You're going to see an increase of traffic and everything like that, but you may not see like a huge increase in lead flow. There'll be some leads coming through. And then months 3 to 6 is when you begin to see a little bit more of like those higher quality conversions, but maybe like your lead flow ticks down a little bit because the algorithm's starting to learn based off the content you're writing and all the SEO work you're doing. And then we say like months 6 through 9 is kind of like really when you begin to see like the engines like kind of in that full moving cycle of like you are then at that point you are seeing the leads come through not only, but they're more of like the right quality leads and all of that stuff. And it doesn't have to be expensive. Like you can get, even if you can't afford a ton, like there's agencies out there where one of them that offer like a Google business only SEO plan. And even if that's just your foundation for now to get your SEO wheel kind of going there, and then you implement SEO down the road for your website and those things, like I'm assuming even in phase 1, like if somebody could go spend $500-600 a month on a Google business only plan, like that is good enough for them to try to get the wheels going and everything.
Because at the end of the day, people say all roads lead to your website, or your website's your hub of marketing. And that's kind of true, but also I would say a large portion of the time, people are going to just Google you. I literally Googled, I went and got breakfast tacos from Sonic this morning, and I Googled Sonic. I knew where it was. I still Googled it just to see if they took Apple Pay, because I realized, oh crap, I left my wallet at home.
Yep.
So that's a really random example, but the point is, like, I knew where it was. I'm not new to Sonic. Sonic's great, but I still Googled it. So, and I wasn't looking at their website. And so that's just something everyone needs to remember, is like, that's like, your website might be where people end up, and you can have a lot of your traffic go there, but people are going to Google your name. And if you don't show up, then you're in trouble. You don't even need to rank for Roofer Near Me immediately. Eventually, let's try to. But for now, just make sure your name shows up right when they search for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So we get into like all these different things. Like let's just say somebody goes with Google ads or they go with Facebook ads. Then kind of phase 3 is then going into like a much more scaled acquisition, referral partners, branding, all of that. And I think based off conversations, like this is a little bit more where Elizabeth, you are working kind of a little bit more closely with your clients on like implementing kind of this phase 3 aspect of things. So do you want to kind of touch on like exactly what that looks like, and kind of there's in a way there's some overlap between 2 and 3, but like how are you taking it above and beyond at this point?
I would say we both do.
Okay.
Brad's giggling, which means he thinks that I'm being put on the spot. Really, actually, in phase 3, a lot of it is team stuff too. So we always say, like, we basically solve 5 problems: your leverage, leads, systems, team, and scale. And really in 3 is where we look a lot at the team too. And, like, what are the gaps? Like, where are the things that we can fill in the blanks? Like, what needs to be filled in at the spot? And I think that can be tricky, because as entrepreneurs, sometimes we hire based on what we think we need versus what we actually need. And I think that in phase 3, it's like a time to identify that. I think it's really easy to, like, again, back to the comfort, we want to kind of take away our discomfort. And so we fill in those blanks instead of like looking at, okay, what makes sense at this time? And so a lot of that happens in phase 3 too. So identifying like, what are those needs that we have? And so it's,
yeah, he was laughing because he said earlier on that like he just naturally sometimes talks over you, and I'm like, that's exactly what I do with people too. So I'm like, I'm gonna put Elizabeth on the spot right now and just kind of see what's going on here. So, but yeah,
happy to be.
Phase 3, I'm I have like a post that I'm reading, but examples would be like really investing in referral relationships, whether that's time or money, sponsorships. SEO would definitely be an example. You may double down on SEO at this time. Sales team. These are all non-linear marketing channels. Your sales team is their marketers for you, especially if you are controlling the inputs that they're doing as much as possible. But at the end of the day, we want to have something where dollars in or time in usually stays about the same, but the return increases exponentially over time. So time is usually one of the biggest variables with more nonlinear strategies, but you don't have time early on.
Right.
So that's why we go back to that. While the processes are very branding oriented, but there's a much quicker conversion window. Then we're doing the fastest conversion window, which will be that first scaled acquisition channel, and then bringing on the sales team, trying to make sure they have each have an appointment a day or so from the ads and marketing that you're doing. And then you can go back to more nonlinear stuff, because at that point you have some cash coming in, you have some consistent growth, and you're able to invest in things that are more difficult to measure. And so time is the biggest thing. I mean, you could have a billboard up for 3 months and people may not notice it. And by a year, maybe most people in town are like, yeah, I've been looking at Screaming Cow Roofing billboard every day for the last year. Every time I drive home, I see it. Where the first 3 months, maybe they kind of noticed it, but it didn't really register. So that's just different example of how time can maybe be the big variable. Like when all of a sudden people are noticing, I saw this a ton of times, because time matters to the consumer as well. It's not just time for it to take to work. It's time being a relevant marker of whether it's worth paying attention to.
Yeah. It's interesting you use that example as a billboard. So I'm part of a couple different like local chambers, and one of them you can get like a spot on this billboard that they have on the highway, and it's like $100 a month or whatever. And our billboard shows like twice an hour for like, I don't know, 5-10 seconds, something like that. So I mean, it barely shows during the day compared to some of these other ones on there. But I just had somebody last week, and that's probably been up for about 6 months. For the first time, I had somebody tell me like, "Hey, we'd actually seen your billboard on 55," and I was like, "I forgot I even had that thing up there." And so it was, as you're talking, I'm like, that I just went through that exact thing with us.
Just how people worked. Like everyone gets so obsessed with like, how do Facebook ads work? How does Google work? It's like, think about what the intent is of people who are on the platform, and then just think about how people work. Or if they're not on a platform and you're pretty much just there in their everyday life in some way, then how are you going to become relevant? And it's just time. Like,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's why I do a lot of like personal branding and all that to try to drive leads and all that. Part of this webinar is part of, or this live is of doing personal branding and trying to bring that awareness and everything back to people's mind. So then we go, wrapping up here, we go to like the last phase. So phase 4 of this is kind of like growing your leadership team and kind of building more of like an internal biz dev team. So what exactly does that look like? Because this is where a lot of business owners. So my first business, I like grabbed on everything. I'm like, I'm not letting things go. I had a leadership team, and bless their heart, like I was probably one of the worst people to work with, because like I would act like I was giving things up and then I wouldn't. And I learned from that. So now in this business, it's almost like I give things up too early sometimes to other people. So trying to then migrate to where you're kind of been doing a lot of this yourself, and now you're trying to bring in a leadership team and people to help execute and do things for you. It can make people uncomfortable, and it's hard. Sometimes they can resist that change. But what does that process look like with you guys?
at each step, we're looking to create more leverage. I mean, if you look at how everything's working, if you look at each of the 4 phases, it's really all about finding more leverage. in each of them. And at this point, time is probably one of the biggest pieces of that you have not fully figured out. So this is when you're able to begin investing in leaders within your company in some way that can remove the critical thinking and remove the decision making and remove the managing off your plate. You may, at this point, hire a chief marketing officer. You may, at this point, hire a head of finance. You may, at this point, hire sales manager. And you maybe did a little bit earlier, and that's okay. But the point is, this is when you try to step in to your whatever your future vision for the business is. This is when you really start doing that. We actually have a call, a few minutes ago, but I emailed him with a private equity guy, and we're building relationship with him. We're going to have him taking a more involved approach with some of our clients, just so they know what's going on and they know what to do. And one of the big things is you don't want to be the bottleneck of your own business. And there's a couple different times where you are the main bottleneck. The first time that you're the main bottleneck is before you have processes, before you have any leverage, when it's purely effort in, investment in, output, and it's not a very good ratio. Then you can begin bringing on a team and you start experiencing all the benefits of being in more than one place at once, essentially, because you have a bunch of people following that same process that you've used to grow. And then you're starting to use a different type of leverage, which is capital, to invest in getting in more and more and more leads. Then a different type of leverage, which is more capital and media, all the things to where you're just putting your company everywhere. And at this point, the main thing that you need to do is work on getting out of the way, as long as you did everything else right. Now, we're not there yet. I'm still taking sales calls. Elizabeth is still very involved with the clients. It's not something that everyone is at, but it is just the proper order of operations.
Right.
And
yeah.
That's why we're bringing in the private equity guy to help and to communicate and to be present with our clients, because that's more his area of expertise. It's not necessarily somewhere where I've never helped a roofing company hire a CFO, for instance. We've watched roofing companies successfully do that, but it's really just a marker of where to focus.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you guys obviously have a call to hop on to and everything like that from here. So we'll go ahead and wrap this up. But for anybody who's looking to kind of get in touch with you guys, or just learn a little bit more about what you're doing, where's kind of the best place that they can get in touch? Do you guys have like a free ebook, free guide, anything like that?
Yeah. So if they go to bgb-enterprises.com, like right in your face is going to be a PDF that goes over some neighborhood marketing strategies. It's been years that we've been sending people this PDF and they really like it. We have a free Facebook group, the Built Right Contractor, and that would be a good place to go. And then just don't be a stranger. Friend Elizabeth or I on Facebook, and we'd be happy to connect.
Absolutely. Well, thank you guys again. For anybody listening, if you're not at the point in which you think that you're ready for an agency, Brad and Elizabeth would be the place to go. The last thing I want you guys to do is to try to sign up and work with an agency like us and feel like you're wasting a bunch of money because of the processes and the foundation and everything is not there. So with that, I will let you guys go and we will end this live.
Thanks so much, Brad.
Thanks, guys. Yep, absolutely.
See ya.